Alright, in this video I am going to talk about, the different kinds of stacks that are out there. The two main types of stacks you'll see out there are the LAMP stack and the mean stack. Now, LAMP, for example, is Linux, Apache, MySQL, and PHP. That's what it stands for. Mean, the other main arch competitor of it, is basically Mongo, Express.js, Angular, and Node.js. Now, and we'll talk a little bit about these others too, because Ruby on Rails is technically its own stack. Django plus Python, technically its own stack, although they say that's monolithic, so it's a little weird, a little rigid. But then you got Java plus Spring, which is kind of its own stack as well. And Mern, which is a React-based version of Mean. But anyway, a stack, again, Linux is a little superfluous to put that in there, so it's really the AMP thing you need to think about. Because again, I think you probably can install this on a PC too. But I'm not, again, totally sure about that. I know you can install some of these individual components, like MySQL, for example, and I think Apache Server. I haven't checked, though. But anyway, PHP is actually the language of Apache Server. So really, when you're talking about a LAMP stack, you're really only talking about two things, MySQL and Apache. Okay, and these stacks basically involve the rear end of a website. You can have just like a web page, just like this. That's what they call a static page, because it doesn't really do anything. It's not communicating with a database. You're not dynamically sending data around. Even though it's kind of does something, but it's, in fact, you can have animations and so forth in HTML, but that doesn't mean it's dynamic. It's still a static site. But this is the front end. Okay, what goes on the server side, that's the rear end. But like I said, even to put this out here, you need a web server. So, of course, you can host it through somebody if you want to do that, or you can set up your own server, which means you'll need something like a LAMP stack. So, but the Apache part of this, is the actual, web server itself, and it speaks PHP so that it can allow your web page to interface with the database. Okay, that's basically mostly what PHP does, even though that's its primary reason for being there. It's actually the language of your web server, allowing it to communicate with your database. But again, it can do other things too, but that's still primarily what it's used for. That's why it really exists. It's a means of interfacing a database to your website, essentially. Again, it's a little more versatile than that, but the thing is, that's one of its big purposes in life. Now, to contrast that with Mean is basically just Angular or Node.js is what it really is. Node.js is the equivalent and the arch rival of Apache Server. So pretty much, and the M here is Mongo, which is basically a NoSQL database. So it's a totally different concept in databases from MySQL, which is a traditional SQL database, whereas the Mean is actually based on JSON. So these are like encoded JSON files, called Bison or something like that. But in any event, they're basically JSON files, and it's storing a database as pages instead of records like you have in SQL. So, but again, these are supposed to be good for like dynamic single-page applications, SPAs, which is what the trend is these days to have like little, I guess, calculator apps or gizmos or whatever for your website. That's a single page app or an example of one, or have a mydating.com or whatever would probably be I don't know, but the point is that they're for simpler websites, whereas a LAMP stack is better for the more traditional, complex type of websites, the monolithic type sites. Although I think even the LAMP stacks can accommodate like micro services and things like that. which is another complicated thing I really hadn't gotten much into yet, but it kind of falls into that whole RESTful thing. So, but yeah, the mean stack, like I said, really, you really are talking about the N being the operating word here, whereas the A is the operating word here, because it's all about Apache server. That's what it's really centered around. Because you can use other databases with Apache server. You don't have to be stuck with MySQL, or its variant like Maria database or whatever. You can use other databases. It wouldn't be a LAMP stack anymore, but the point is you can actually use it with Mongo, if you want to. There are interfaces for it available out there. But still, this is just what people mostly use, so that's why it's called LAMP stack. But it really is all about Apache. And whereas down here in the mean stack, it's really all about Node.js. Because these other things like Angular and Express.js, they're actually just a veneer that goes over Node. So they're a means of accessing and and streamlining. Like Express, is like a set of functions, almost like a library, so it allows you to do certain things more efficiently than with just Node.js alone. Now Node.js, doesn't speak PHP like Apache Server does. Node.js, speaks JavaScript, so just like your website does, more or less. So that's the appeal to it, is that with a LAMP stack, well, you've got to because your front end is certainly JavaScript based and so forth. You got to learn JavaScript for sure, but then you got to learn PHP, a totally different language, on the rear end. So those are two totally different things. And there are some weird things about PHP. It's a pretty simple language. There are some things that really took me off guard, but it's not too complicated. It's a little weird in some ways. But Node.js is certainly going to be based on JavaScript. Although I hear there's some differences. Again, I didn't have time to really get into it deeply yet. But like I said, Angular, which used to be AngularJS, but it's since version 2, they totally changed everything. Google was behind Angular, I think, and but now they're, it was AngularJS originally, but now it's Angular, which is supposedly harder to learn and really complicated, and it's got a supposedly really steep learning curve compared to like React. But even React is kind of weird because it's got that weird library that you got to learn, the Redux or whatever library that's supposed to be really tough. But basically they're things, as best I can tell, that are means of interfacing, actually interacting with the forms dynamically is what they're kind of for. But and React is the same way. It's the arch competitor of Angular. React is. But both of these are based off of Node.js. They're still all basically written in JavaScript, I think, and but they're basically Node.js applications, really, or libraries, as the case may be, and there are lots of them. But these are just principal libraries that are often used. Although you don't have to use Angular, and in fact, there are other alternatives to Angular and React apparently. So. But they're still the main two. So, both of these stacks here involve Express too, and Express, is really just a way of, a set of functions that help you streamline certain things. It's like automating certain tasks, is what it is. But now the Mongo database, again, is really optional, because you can use any number of databases with it, especially if you use some of the the interface libraries they have out there. I forgot the name of right now of some of them, but I can see it in my head, but I can't quite remember. But in any event, MERN and mean, are two main stacks. The only difference really, the fundamental stack, is that one is based on React and the other is Angular. But again, I haven't gotten too much into either of those, so I don't know that much about it, because it was kind of hard just to try to figure out what it basically does, and even seeing an example of what an Angular application looks like is kind of tough. So and trying to get a straight answer out of what it friggin' is kind of tough. So but I just know that it is a kind of a method of interacting. It's Vue, VUE JS, is an alternative to Angular, for example, and it's really kind of about interacting with the data. And Sails supposedly is an alternative to some of that stuff. And Sails is actually a pretty good little deal. It's kind of reminiscent a little bit of WordPress, but not really. And here's a little site I did in Sails, because I did it out of frustration, if I can find it. Oh, this is something I did in WordPress, by the way, on my CentOS server, which is a lamp stack. Bastards. But yeah, this is like a blog site, so I can write blogs to myself, whatever. But damn it. Got ADD, and having a little fucking gnat zooming around doesn't help. But yeah, let's see. Where the hell did I put my site at? I had it up a minute ago. What the hell happened? Oh, here it is, I guess. Yeah, this is this is on my server, one of my other servers. This is off of an Ubuntu, not an Ubuntu server, but it's Ubuntu with server on it, but it's got a it's got the mean stack installed on it. Two other servers, I've got a lamp stack installed on it. But this is like an example website they did with Sails. So, and they have, kind of this fleshed out. They can go change it, as much as you want, and, but it has like a, it handles, like the ability to, have people signed up and everything like that. So, I mean, it does form validation and everything. So, but again, it's a good example of what it means to interact between a front end and a rear end application. So if nothing else, that's why I installed it, because at some point I'm going to have to come back to some of this stuff, and it's good to have an example that actually does something, even though this is not based specifically on again, I think this is based on React, but I'm not even quite clear on that, so I think it's a MERN stack, but it's still basically, it does show you kind of an interacting application. But I think this isn't linked to my database, because I didn't have to link it to my database, but they do have a version of this online too, that's actually live, and you can actually upload pictures to it and stuff. This you can try to, but it won't store them, so I don't think it's linked to the database. I think it's just storing everything in a JSON file, but not actually putting it in a database, because that's why it won't save the pictures. If you go to the site, you'll see what I mean. But the point is that again, this was a little reminiscent of with Sails, S-A-I-L-S, as an alternative to Angular and some of these other things. It's supposed to be a lot simpler, and they also have like Meteor, which is supposed to do everything, but it's kind of proprietary, and I think they're trying to sell you something. Even these guys, Sails, I mean, if I recall correctly, let me make sure of that. I don't know if I'm going to be able to make sure of that or not. REST. I know I've got it here, so here it is. Let's see. Okay, no, maybe not. Yeah, because one of these guys actually try to charge you for the two. They actually have like a tutorial on there, but they actually try to charge you $9 for it. I forget which one of these guys it was. I'll mention it if it comes up. But at any rate, that's basically what you got with these stacks. I mean, it's basically a way of interfacing a website to a database. Okay. And again, even with Mean, I mean, again, it's all about Node.js. It's all about Node.js. In fact, the JavaScript, that comes from Node.js. It's a JavaScript interpreter, but it's also a server. I mean, it fulfills the same role that Apache does, which is a server for the LAMP stack, which speaks PHP. Well, the mean stack and the MERN stack and a bunch of other alternative stacks is based on Node.js. So that's, which is a web server that speaks JavaScript and helps you interface to a different type of database like a Mongo. But again, you can interface it to MySQL or SQLite or any other databases too, a Couch or whatever. So it's just a matter of having the different interface routines. But basically these are just different ways of doing the same thing. And again, Ruby on Rails, etc., all constitute a rear end stack too. But they allow you to make dynamic applications that do things like I showed you with this, where you can handle users logging into your sites or blogs. It would even be an application, or like on Facebook or something like that, setting up your own Facebook kind of thing, would be kind of an example of like a MERN stack, I believe. When you could probably do something similar with a LAMP stack, but MERN stack may be better for that kind of thing. But the point is, that's what really these stacks are. They're just a way of connecting your server, your web server, to a database and to your web page. So an Angular, for example, is supposed to act like an interface between the front end and the rear end, and the same thing applies to Apache server speaking PHP. But again, Angular and Express, are really sort of applications of Node.js. So as is a React.js. It's all built on Node.js. That's the key. And Node.js, again, is an environment. It speaks JavaScript, but it's not a language. Like Apache server is not a language. Okay, but Node.js is a server. So as Apache server is a server, it's a web server specifically, not a file server or a mail server. Those are other types of servers. But specifically, it's a web server. So PHP is the language I speak, and because it was kind of hard to kind of get into my head, but I had an epiphany about it, and that's basically how it works. And you can actually build applications on Node.js, though it can actually act as a standalone language or standalone device. They have something called Electron, for example, which is what Visual Studio Code is based on, but it's actually based around Node.js and some other glue they put on it so that you can write desktop applications. So it's not just limited, strictly speaking, to the internet, but usually it is. It's about server-side internet. So, that's so again, you can write something called web apps, which actually look. And this isn't a web app, this is based on Node, but it's really an Electron project. But you can write things that basically are web apps. They are actually run in a browser, but not really. And another example of an Electron-based product is this. I'm pretty sure this Brackets, HTML editor, which is great, by the way, is based on it, because it's all built around Chromium, the Chromium browser, which I think is what this is. Let me make sure that, well, I don't know if I can, well, this is Google Chrome, it says, but it's what Electron does. It actually combines Chromium with, Chromium technology anyway, with Node.js, so you can build, desktop apps. But in any event, I forgot what I was going to do. But this, like I said, it's that still is what a rear end basically is versus a front end, and how they talk. And again, you don't have to have a stack to have a web page. You can have a static web page, but again, you know, a dynamic web page will help you put like stock information out here, or anything out of a database, you know, because that's what it is. That's what, you know, is dynamic about it. So, you know, keep track of, you know, allow people to join your website or whatnot, and keep track of them specifically and so forth. I guess, you know, kind of manage cookies and stuff as well, you know, is another thing that you know, the stack will kind of do. But certainly allowing you to do, you know, sophisticated things with cookies. You know, cookies are, you know, little bits of information that are actually sort of stored on a, you know, on a person's machine, you know, but you can access them, you know, from a given website, you know, from your server. So you know, if you have put a cookie on somebody's computer, you can access it, you know, store, you know, like user settings and things like that. You know, a lot of people used to use them to spy on people too, but you know, the point is that allows you to, you know, kind of have, it's one way to kind of store information about people who visit your website, you know, by putting a token on somebody's computer. Anyway, that'll do it for this video, and we'll talk about some of this other stuff just as a kind of a wrap up afterward.